Good afternoon. This week we've taken a look at building academic communities and specifically what Christian scholarship looks like. In that we looked at George Marsden as we get to the final chapters of his work and how he considers these outrageous ideas of Christian scholarship and what that looks like. Um, he expresses a deep concern about the survivability of Christian scholarship based on its current trajectory. It's not an entirely cynical piece, in my opinion, but it contains its share of cautionary warnings. He looks to find a balance between cultural ideals that society demands and that academic institutions often seek to comply with and even promote, and how broad religious ideals can coexist and find ways to shine through the dense background noise of competing ideas. Um, Maybe ideas are not the best word that we might use in this context, but the right word is values, and that word certainly shows up a lot in his discussion. And this is because values are part of almost every conversation, and yet there's no universal definition of what values include, and more importantly, exclude. Kind of reminds me of the word quality. You can set a standard for quality, and as long as it meets the standard, regardless of whether that standard is high or low, it fits the definition of the word quality. Well, values are much the same way. We can define our values, and as long as we adhere to those, whether they're weak or strong, we are still in compliance with it. So it's a tough discussion to have. If the discussion was strictly conducted amongst Christians, it might be a lot simpler, but we have a whole other set of issues to overcome within the confines of scholarship and academia. The very idea of values become meaningless when they're used to promote self-interest. So while administrators can attempt to control the narrative, the definition of values, while attempting to be inclusive, it's so broad-reaching that it becomes meaningless. Um, and oftentimes they expand the meaning so greatly that it allows for so many exceptions. But um, if you allow for an exception to a part, you really are taking an exception to the whole. And there's such a greater fear of promoting inclusiveness over right and wrong that the approaches to scholarship based on Christian ideals take on the appearance of an apology almost in advance. The idea that there can be a homogenous approach to education, let alone one that is characterized by Christian scholarship, may be overly optimistic. Um, so therefore, to attract both students and faculty to academia, compromise is sought. And with each compromise, we give a little bit of ourselves. This is very similar to democracy. We sacrifice some of our liberties in exchange for the protection of the state. To be included and to include others, we give up and compromise some of our own values to create a more acceptable norm that's has greater reach and is more accessible to people. And yet to stand entirely on principle and stick to the truth and the word is to define a rigid set of values that we understand will be exclusionary. So eventually it becomes a choice, and that's where this outrageous idea that Marsden struggles with comes from, in that, can we stick to that adherence to truth? The Catholics have remained perhaps the most successful because they're more comfortable with a stricter adherence and the resultant exclusion of others' ideas, but the trade-off is the preservation of truth. And I think that's what we're looking for here. So I look forward to this discussion. This is going to be a tough one because we all do come from different backgrounds, but we are seeking truth. And so that's what Marsden is inviting us to do, and yet still excel with our Christian scholarship. Thank you.